In the golden age of the Abbasid Caliphate, when Baghdad was the beating heart of knowledge and wealth, there lived a restless soul, a young man with riches in his hands, but storms in his heart. His name was Sinbad. Cue distant seagulls, the creaking of wood, and rolling waves. The palace of emptiness. In a palace embroidered with gold and perfumed with rosewater, Sinbad walked barefoot across marble floors. Servants bowed, music filled the halls, and meals arrived before he could feel hunger. But none of this satisfied him. He stared out of his high window every evening, watching the orange sun dip behind the rooftops of Baghdad. "Is this life?" he often whispered to himself. "A man born into comfort, dying without a story." What haunted him most were the tales of old sailors in the marketplace, of islands that breathed, birds bigger than ships, and diamonds guarded by snakes. That was when he made the decision. He would not die a prisoner of velvet and luxury. He sold his fine clothes, gave away his fine carpets, and took only what he needed. With that, he bought passage aboard a merchant ship bound for unknown waters. The call of the sea, the ship left the docks of Basra at dawn, its sails catching wind like wings. Sinbad stood at the bow, face to the sea, heart pounding like a war drum. The crew were hardened men, fishermen, traders, pearl divers. They laughed when they saw Sinbad's soft hands and silk-lined sandals. But as the days passed, he worked alongside them, tying ropes, washing decks, and learning the language of waves and wind. The sea transformed him. They passed archipelagos of crystal water, saw dolphins dance in the moonlight, and fished beside islands of coral. On the seventh day, as the sun rose behind them, a sailor shouted, "Land ho! An island! Untouched! Cheers!" Land meant rest, fire, and food. They anchored the ship and rowed ashore. The island that wasn't. The island was paradise, green with tall palms, quiet streams, and birds with feathers like fire and emerald. They gathered firewood and began roasting fish. Sinbad sat alone, watching the horizon. Something didn't feel right. There was no sound of birds chirping anymore. No breeze. The ground was too smooth, still. And then a low, terrible groan came from beneath. "Earthquake!" shouted a sailor. "Run!" screamed another. The truth struck like lightning. The island was not an island. It was the back of a colossal sea creature, a whale so ancient that trees had grown on its shell while it slept. The fire had awakened it. The creature roared, arched its back, and dove into the sea. The forest bent and cracked. Men fell into the water. The boat capsized. Sinbad was thrown into the air and crashed into the churning sea. He clawed for breath, grasped a plank of wood, and floated. 7 days in the deep, alone in the vast blue. The sun burned his skin by day. Cold stars watched him by night. He had no food, no water, only hope. On the 3rd night, he dreamed of a golden bird that flew above him and said, "Courage! The sea does not drown those who listen to its voice." On the 7th morning, his eyes barely open, he saw land, a real island. He kicked weakly, and the waves carried him to shore. The island of fortune. When he awoke, he was surrounded by people in strange robes, speaking in a language he did not understand. They gave him water, fruit, and a place to rest. Soon they brought him before their king, King Mirjan, ruler of the island. The king listened to Sinbad's tale and laughed in amazement. "You are brave," he said, "or perhaps mad, but you have the spirit of the sea in you." Impressed, the king offered Sinbad work, managing the harbor and inspecting cargo. Sinbad, now a changed man, accepted with gratitude. He worked hard. He kept records, solved disputes, and even learned the language of the islanders. The people came to love the strange foreigner who had fallen from the sea. A surprise from the past one day. Months later, a large merchant ship arrived in the harbor. Sinbad walked down to inspect it, and froze. It was the same ship he had set sail on before. The captain saw him and gasped, "By the stars, you survived. We thought the sea had taken you." The captain still had Sinbad's goods, and offered him not only what remained, but his share of the profits. Now a small fortune. When King Mirjan heard Sinbad wished to return home, he gave him gifts beyond measure: golden bowls, pearls the size of olives, silks finer than breath. Returned to Baghdad. When Sinbad stepped back onto the streets of Baghdad, the city he once thought too small now felt massive. He was greeted by old friends, awestruck neighbors, and his loyal servant who wept with joy. He told his tale to wide-eyed children and skeptical nobles, who hung on every word. The island, the 7 nights at sea, the wise king, the return of the ship. But deep in his heart, he knew one thing. This was only the beginning. Subscribe message in a grand voice. And so ends the first voyage of Sinbad the Sailor, a tale of wonder, terror, and survival against all odds. But 6 more voyages await, journeys filled with even greater mysteries, darker dangers, and unimaginable treasures. Subscribe now and hit the bell to set sail with Sinbad again. Because Voyage 2 will take you into the skies, and the jaws of monsters, even the sea fears. The adventure has just begun.